Today's how-to use Illustrator in Prepress. Most of us understand, but maybe sometimes forget, that making a design for online use is different than making one that's going to be printed on paper. Each output has different quality control issues to check for. I'm just going to highlight a couple of the Prepress issues to be aware of when designing in Illustrator. Here we are with an Illustrator file. Under Effect, we can do a lot of cool things. We can stylize, rasterize, add blur, kind of like in Photoshop. But what effect does this have on the print? Well, it can be deadly for your print. It can cause a very bad printout if you do not first go into the Document Raster Effects settings. Here we see these settings, and you'll notice here at this moment the color model is set to bitmap instead of CMYK or grayscale. The resolution is set to screen, which is fine for online use, but deadly if I tried to print this out on a high quality resolution publication. I want to set this at high or minimum medium. Very important settings to be aware of, but the most important is right here. Make sure your vector artwork is going to have high resolution output quality if this file is going to print. A really great resource for Illustrator in general, but also on the Prepress side, is from a gentleman named Mordy. Mordy, the founder of Design Responsibly, is the former Adobe Illustrator product manager. So basically, he knows what he's talking about. Mordy Golding has many interesting podcasts on how to use Illustrator. And you'll see from many of the questions here, a lot of the questions are Prepress orientated, and you'll get very detailed answers. Last year, Mordy did a particular episode on Illustrator and Prepress, where he highlighted FlightCheck and other tools to help you simplify the Prepress process in Illustrator.
Very strongly go by. Work a lot in print. It's called Real World Production. It's written by a friend of mine. Her name is Claudia, McCue, and it's an excellent book. It's not a really thick book. It doesn't have to be. But if you are working in the world of print, you need to get this book because it is a fantastic book. What I want to focus on today, though, is how Illustrator kind of fits into that workflow. What can you do inside of Illustrator to kind of make sure that you don't fall into any traps, you avoid some pitfalls, that you know what to look out for, and hopefully it'll save you some money. That's my hope. Hopefully it'll save you some time. And the great thing is that we're going to talk a little bit about pre-flooding your documents also. That's kind of just, making sure your document is correct, collecting for output.
All right, so I'm going to link down to Mordy's presentation here so you can get the high quality video yourself. This was a screen captured version. It's a great tutorial on Illustrator and Prepress and many of the tools and features available. I'll also link to the book Mordy mentioned in the comments section below in YouTube. Another tip that most every illustrator will learn when being taught Adobe Illustrator is before sending off to be printed or used further your logo or graphic, it's important to not just have the individual fonts here, but to convert this type into outlines. In Illustrator, under Type, Create Outlines. What this does is now makes the text here one big graphic. They're not individual fonts. I don't need this font anymore. So that takes away one problem which many people will have. By converting the fonts to outline, you will not have to package your fonts. And that's something which Markzware's FlightCheck does do and is handy because sometimes you will need to use the native fonts to send to the next artist in the workflow, or perhaps if it's a complex packaging job, you need to send it unflattened, the fonts unoutlined, so that the next person in the Prepress department can make deeper, in-depth changes. Markzware's FlightCheck will collect and package all used fonts and artwork in your Illustrator files. Very handy to have. And that's another tip I want to give. How can I check my Illustrator files without going through with my eyeball and looking each element and clicking around piece for piece to see if these place graphics are high res. How can I do that in an instant, like an X-ray? Before I show you tools to automate the prepress process, don't forget to check out Adobe's site itself for more information and tips. For instance, and I'll include this link below, here's an article on Setup Color Managed Print Workflows in Illustrator, InDesign, and Photoshop CS and later. Just do a search on the Adobe community pages. This will bring up many useful articles. We can see many of the articles here. Adobe Illustrator CS5, preparing artwork for color separating. Adobe Illustrator CS5, image resolution guidelines for final output. Let's click on that one. You'll see what we read there is a host of information on image resolution for commercial printing, desktop printing, or web publishing. Naturally, under commercial printing, you'll read that commercial printing requires 150 to 300 ppi or more, depending on the press and the screen frequency you're using. In other words, you need to collaborate with your printer or your print broker. In general, you'll want to have a file that has a resolution of over 300 dpi. And that is an effective resolution. So if you take an image that's 300 dpi and you stretch it 300% bigger, well, its resolution just dropped 300%. So it's no longer 300 dpi, but 100 dpi. And that will not print very well. These are all things which FlightCheck will tell you in an instant. And get help directly from Adobe because they have a lot of very useful information. Or from other people like Mordy or Claudia. These tips will help you, but FlightCheck does it for you in a snap of the fingers. Let me show you how. So here we have FlightCheck, a standalone application for Macintosh, now in version 6.80, which just came out with CS5.5, Quark 9, and the latest PDF and image file format support. It is your workhorse if you're anyway involved in prepress or outputting your file even for the internet. As you saw, there's many options for that as well on that Adobe Help page. How can we be sure that that logo we were just making, the graphic, will print correctly in our brochure? Well, we simply go and get the file, in this case the native.ai file, and we drag and drop it onto the FlightCheck icon. Then gives a full quality assurance check, a pre-flight check, gathering information on all used elements, seen and unseen. We get a full pre-flight report. I'm not going to go over all the ins and outs, but it's important to understand the ground controls. This is where you set up your checks, or have your printer or prepress partner help set them up for you. They can be imported and exported, the ground control checks. There's checks for not only PDF files, but also the native Illustrator files. You can have them automatically change based on which file you check. Lastly, a very popular feature for Illustrator users is the package, or what we call collect feature. This allows you to package all used fonts and images or place artwork in your Illustrator file and collect it into one file, even compressing it with a FlightCheck approved stamp or not if that's the case. FlightCheck does the same for all file formats supported like InDesign and Quark and Photoshop as well. Very handy to have in the tool chest. Try FlightCheck today, 30 days at no cost for the full working version, and see for yourself how it will help you on the question how to use Illustrator in prepress. Before we end, there's another quick tip to remember. When creating a new document in Illustrator, you can also choose under New Document Profile right away a print layout. You'll see the settings change and everything seen and unseen will change to help it be print optimized. This is a good place to start if you're making a file for print, and you'll see here PPI 300 color mode CMYK. If we switch that to web, you'll see that all changes. And instead of size in millimeters, in this case it changes to pixels. So this has been your quick tip today on how to use Illustrator in prepress. Actually, it's a series of tips and an ongoing process. As graphic designers, quality, yes, once again, is a never-ending process. There is much more we can go over, However, this has been an introduction on how to use Illustrator and Prepress. Use the internet to your advantage. Use the Adobe help pages. Check out resources from Mordy and Claudia. And use tools like FlightCheck and others to help you ascertain very quickly and automatically what is the state of your file. Thank you. David Dilling from Markzware, signing off.